All right, so last year there was a new release in the world of pour over that was, I think, one of the best releases all year from a company called Orea. Not that release though, the one that everybody was hyping up for weeks on social media. While everyone had their eyes on that really big and dramatic release from Orea, there was this other almost little footnote in the background. The Orea Baby 01. It came out quietly, it was made in limited volumes, and it was a little expensive at $45 for, a one-piece plastic dripper. But I used this thing and it just worked. It was fast, it was simple, very forgiving, but also very useful for different types of edge case high performance brewing as well. But there was one problem with it for some people, and that was that it was made of plastic. Eastman Triton plastic, which is pretty good for hot liquids, but still plastic. Then Orea released these very bright and colorful versions of the Baby 01, which are very cool and I quite like, but didn't really help matters much when it came to the super plasticky vibe. I was brewing with this one actually shortly after I got it, and Sarah looks over at me and she's like, is that thing like toxic? Because it kind of looks like it. I think it's cool, but I see where people are coming from. Then I got a PR box in the mail from Orea. And inside were two Baby 01 drippers made of metal. One in their raw steel format and another in this powder coated finish with a ceramic inner lining. So word got out about these things and everybody was very excited and assumed they were going to be crazy expensive. And when Orea actually made them available for sale, they were only $7 more than the plastic one. And of course, they basically sold out immediately. What's really interesting to me is that for years, Orea has kind of fiddled with their drippers, added different geometries, different bottoms, and kind of made the drippers more complex over time. These metal versions feel like a return to format of the original V2 dripper that made them so popular in the first place. Small, fast flowing, and basically indestructible. So you have to ask, if the Baby 01 was so great and now there's a metal version of it, is this the last dripper you'll ever buy? Maybe at the end of this video, you can let me know what you think about that. But there are definitely some surprises that I had along the way. Both of these drippers are double wall stainless, actually. And when you look up close at them, they're really quite well built. A good example of this is when you look on the raw stainless one and you look at this joint here where the base connects to the main body of the dripper. You can really see this weld here, and it just looks like it has been done with a high amount of precision. So these are very well put together. Roughly the same geometry and dimensions as the plastic Baby. The inner wall material is obviously different between the plastic, the raw steel, and the ceramic coated version. And we're going to come back to that. The hole on the bottom of both metal units actually measured about 1 millimeter smaller in diameter in comparison to the plastic versions that I have. Apparently it's all within spec, but I did notice that on my units. But besides that, it basically is a metal Baby 01. You can use wave filters, you can use flat filters. It's got the just works factor in a different material with a lot of options to help you tweak your brews. Now, because it's double-walled stainless here, there's a couple things that go along with that. Number one, it's quite easy to handle when it's hot. You're not going to be worrying about reaching down and picking it up and feeling like it's too hot to handle. It's actually quite comfortable. There also is a little lip up here that goes around on both of these units that doesn't exist on the plastic versions. And in my experience anyway, that lip can actually make wave filters just a little bit trickier to seat fully and properly. Besides that though, they brew pretty similarly to the plastic Babies, sort of, with a couple differences that may or may not make a big difference to you. The first thing that you would kind of intuitively expect when you look at this big metal dripper in comparison to a plastic is this is going to suck all the heat out of your brew. And I don't know if it's the thickness of the metal, the way they've done the double wall or what, but when I compared it to the plastic versions, if anything, I found that the metal actually maintained a little bit more heat in the slurry than even the plastic did. One thing I definitely did not expect though, is that I found that in some cases, the metal babies would actually flow quite a bit more quickly than the plastic ones, which was a surprise, especially because the hole on the bottom here is, if anything, a little bit smaller. Here's my best guess at what is happening here. When I use wave filters, the ones with the frills that kind of go around, the brew times were more comparable to the plastic. However, when I used flat filters that adhere to the whole inner surface of the dripper, I found that the metal drippers flowed significantly faster in many cases compared to the plastic. And you might ask why that could be. Well, one thing that you might not know is that at a more microscopic level, Triton plastic looks totally smooth and clear, but it actually is a very grippy material, especially in comparison to steel, glass, or ceramic coatings. That more textured surface can actually suck the paper filter in and cause it to adhere at a microscopic level a lot more tightly to the dripper wall than it would have on here, which is a much slippier surface. That, in theory, would make it a lot more difficult for water to kind of slip through the paper filter and work its way down in between a flat paper filter and the wall of the dripper. The more smooth and non-porous a surface is, the more likely that is to happen. And what that is called in the world of pour-over brewing is bypass. Not necessarily a bad thing. Lots of really great drippers that people use all the time actually bypass quite a bit. It just takes a little bit of a different approach. And while visually it may look like a filter is totally flat and adhered around the inside of these two drippers, they could actually be bypassing water around the coffee bed. Maybe not a lot, but more than the plastic would. Depending on what you're doing with your brewing techniques, that may be something that is not an issue at all for you, or it may be something that you're trying to avoid. So if you're really trying to get that super low bypass setup, I would probably recommend going with the plastic from a material standpoint, as it seems to do this the least. The ceramic coated version seems to do this the most out of these three, and the raw steel version comes somewhere in the middle. Now, this is a kind of a tricky thing to measure, especially across different types of filters, different types of brew styles. There's a lot of variables at play, but at least after using these for a few weeks, that was kind of my take on what was likely happening. Also, I've got a friend who has the glass type A version, and their feedback was that material was introducing a little bit more bypass than the raw steel version. One kind of interesting quirk with the ceramic one, I'm assuming is related to the properties of that coating on the inside, is for whatever reason when you're using a wave filter, some of the pleats can kind of collapse in against the wall of the dripper, and that will have an impact on bed depth. Also, if you're doing like really heavy or big pours, I've noticed that the bottom can kind of sag out here a little bit more than on the raw steel or plastic version. Just a couple things to think about when you're weighing how you like to brew. Had a couple friends who I was running ideas by and gave me input into all that stuff, so thank you, you know who you are. Now, I love these drippers. The Baby 01 has been the flat bottom dripper that I have used the most since it kind of came out, and I was able to get tasty brews out of all of them. It just requires a slightly different approach depending on which material you decide to go with. Now, when you're considering any purchase that you're thinking this could be a buy it for life purchase, it needs to perform well, but it also needs to last very well. And when it comes to a plastic dripper, it's no secret that plastic will last for a very long time, maybe in some cases even longer than we may like. It will also start to wear in a certain way eventually, and not kind of in this nice patina way, more in this kind of scratched up and not very nice looking way. The stainless version probably will also wear. It's not going to maintain this nice brushed finish, especially if you're just tossing it in your bag or whatever. But I kind of feel like this one will get more of that lived in nice patina sort of vibe. The black ceramic version, I think they call this obsidian. My first impression when I took these out of the box is this dripper looks really great. But these coatings, the ceramic on the inside and the powder coating on the outside, they're an additional wear point. This one is not dishwasher safe. That's in part due to this coating. If you drop it on pavement or whatever, you could chip it. Just something to think about. Now, when you're considering the raw steel version, when I talk about metal brewing equipment, I invariably get the comment, oh, I don't want that metal taste in my coffee. Just my experience here, when I'm using stainless brewing equipment, I have never gotten a metal taste on my coffee. Espresso machines are made of all metal inside, and nobody says espresso tastes like metal. I do get when people say they can get a metal flavor when they're drinking out of a stainless steel travel mug. I kind of think that might have more to do with something in the aroma, but when it comes to brewing in something like this into a carafe, pouring it out into a glass, never had a metal taste issue with this or other drippers like it. One other consideration, if you're thinking about a dripper like this, these are 0.1 sized. They're small. So depending on how much you want to brew, they may just not work. I typically brew a 15 to 16 gram or smaller dose. I think you can do like up to 18 grams. I think if you try and push into 20 grams, that's probably going to be more than the dripper really is designed for. And depending on your brew setup, you're going to have to manage the size and number of your pours. Also, while they're not the most expensive drippers out there, I do think it's pretty impressive the price they're delivering these materials at the scale they're delivering them at. They are definitely in the what I would call the premium brewer category. The Orea raw steel and obsidian baby 01s are made of SUS 304 Korean stainless steel, and they're manufactured in China. The plastic ones are all made in Taiwan. Now, Orea is based out of the UK, and anytime a company is leveraging contract manufacturing, I always ask some questions about what that looks like. This is a new relationship for Orea, new material, new factory, all that makes sense. The factory that they're working with to produce these is both SMETA and LFGB certified, both of which are great, and I will leave some extra info on those certifications down there in the description if you want to do some digging on that. More important than that, though, I think, is how present a brand actually is at the factory that is making their products. A rubber stamp on a piece of paper is really nice, but if you're not actually there, how are you going to know what the working conditions for the people making your stuff are actually like? On these versions, Orea from Orea had 2 pre-production factory visits prior to the release of these. And when it comes to ongoing visits, he's planning to be there, 3 to 4 times a year, which is pretty good. So we have the highly performing Baby 01 in 2 different metal versions. Sure, they have some individual quirks to them, but I think however you feel about material choice, if you want to get into an Orea flat bottom dripper, I think you're basically covered at this point. I know people who have all of these. They are happy to get the material that they have been wanting for a while, and they like their babies. And if you do buy one of these, particularly this one, I think you're pretty much guaranteed to have something that will last basically forever. Small company, small volumes, not crazy expensive, especially compared to their plastic one, but comparatively more expensive than mass market drippers. Still pretty good, I think. So if all that is the case, is this the last dripper you will ever buy? And, I would love to say yes to that, but I also have to say, I know pour over people, and we love our drippers. We love looking at new drippers. We love buying new drippers. They are fun to play with. As soon as you say it's the last one, I'm just going to say that's dangerous territory. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic, and we'll see you on the next one.